This is the story of one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I live in a small city in a small country in the South Pacific. While there is definitely weird shit that goes on in this country, hitchhikers being murdered, gangs, etc., it's nothing like some of the strange backwater towns of America, and is generally considered to be a very safe place. I'm a female, and this happened last year when I was 24. I sometimes go for walks late at night when I can't sleep, and as I live in an apartment in the middle of town, I walk in areas that are very populated in the day and weekends, but deserted on weeknights. One night I was feeling particularly down in the dumps and couldn't sleep, so I decided to go for a walk. I walked up a long, empty street and then around the block, and made my way back down one of the busiest streets during the day, but being around 2 AM, it was dead. Even though it was brightly lit, it still had an eerie feeling of emptiness. When I was a few blocks away from my apartment, I saw a guy standing on the footpath up ahead. Nothing unusual, but he looked at me as I approached, like he wanted to talk to me. As I passed him, he handed me a pamphlet, and being the overly polite person I am, I took it. As I walked away, I looked at this pamphlet and saw it was some kind of Christian thing, which was talking about sinners and hell. It was weird that this guy was out at this time of night handing out pamphlets, but I just thought whatever and continued on my way. I got to an intersection where 5 streets meet and is one of the busiest in the city. I pressed the button, waiting for the signal to go green so I could cross. There wasn't any traffic, but I was in a hurry, and due to boy racer cars which sped through the city at night, I decided to wait for the signal. As I was waiting, suddenly Pamphlet guy was standing next to me, grinning. He said, "Hi, what's your name? Can I walk you home? Where do you live?" I ignored him as I waited, starting to feel uneasy. Just as the signal went green, my phone rang. It was my sister calling from Switzerland. She must have got the time zone difference mixed up to be calling at this time, but I happily answered. I crossed the road while I was talking to my sister, and got completely engrossed in the story she was telling, to the point where I briefly forgot about this guy. Partway down my street, I looked over my shoulder and saw the guy walking behind me a little way back, and started getting quite nervous. I told my sister what was happening, while telling myself I was being paranoid. I got to the front door of my apartment building and saw that the door was standing open. There's a restaurant in the building, and the employees sometimes leave the door open when they're sorting out the rubbish at the end of the night, which is against the rules of the body corporate. I pressed the button to the lift, and just as I got in, I turned around and saw the guy had just come through the open door and was sprinting towards the lift. The door closed just as he was reaching the lift, while I repeatedly pressed the button to close the doors, silently panicking. Despite the fact that I could hear the button outside the lift being hurriedly pounded on, the lift thankfully lurched upwards and a huge wave of relief washed over me. I told my sister what was happening, and she said to hurry to my apartment and lock the door. The lift stopped at my level, the 3rd story, and I got out and walked to my door. I fumbled around for my keys as my hands were shaking. Just when I got them out, the door which led to the stairs swung open. It was a pamphlet guy. He must have seen which floor the lift stopped and ran up the stairs to my level. I jammed the key in the lock and shoved my way inside, but before I could close the door, he stuck his foot in the door. I screamed and pushed as hard as I could, slamming the door as hard as I could. After several slams, he pulled his foot out, and I managed to close the door and lock it, putting on the chain. It was then I realized that in my panic, I had left the key in the door on the outside. I watched through the peephole and saw him look down and take the key out of the door. Then he stared at the peephole with a creepy, twisted smile on his face. Even though I knew he couldn't see me, it felt like the gaze was boring a hole straight into my mind. I was so scared that I just froze, with my sister still on the other end of the phone, which was now lying on the floor. My heart was pounding faster and harder than I've ever felt before, and I could hear a rushing noise which seemed like it came from inside my head. After what seemed like 10 minutes, but was probably around 1, he turned and he walked to the door to the stairs. As he opened the door, he turned back, looking straight at me, and held up the key, swinging it back and forth and grinning. Then he disappeared through the door. I started crying and picked up the phone, explaining what happened to my very worried sister. She told me to call my mom and stay with her for the night, which I did. Of course, the next day I got the locks changed, but I'm still terrified that I'll come back and try the key. I'm now much less naive and I've stopped going for late night walks.